Hi everyone, I'm Emma.
I'm Jack.
Welcome
Welcome
to
to
our
our
channel.
channel.
I think learning English is one of the most popular goals for people around the world. Many people want to speak English well, but they often don't know where to start.
That's true. A lot of people have the desire to learn English, but they feel overwhelmed because there are so many different methods and resources.
Exactly. Some people study grammar, some people memorize vocabulary, and some people watch videos every day. But after a while, they still feel like they are not improving.
Yes, and that can be frustrating. Many learners spend a lot of time studying, but they don't always use the right approach.
Why do you think so many people struggle with learning English?
I think one reason is that people expect results too quickly. They study for a few weeks and hope they can suddenly speak fluently.
That's a common problem. Learning a language takes time.
Exactly. Learning English is not like memorizing a simple fact. It's a skill that develops through practice.
I like that comparison. It's similar to learning a sport or playing a musical instrument.
Yes, you cannot become a great basketball player by only reading books about basketball. You have to practice playing.
The same thing applies to English.
Absolutely. You need to listen, speak, read, and write regularly.
But many people spend most of their time studying only one area.
That's true. For example, some learners focus only on vocabulary. They memorize thousands of words, but when someone speaks to them, they still cannot understand.
Why does that happen?
Because knowing a word and being able to use a word are different skills.
That's a very important point.
Yes, you may recognize a word when you see it in a textbook, but when you hear it in a real conversation, your brain may not recognize it quickly.
So listening practice is extremely important.
Definitely. Listening helps your brain become familiar with the natural rhythm, pronunciation, and speed of English.
I think many learners underestimate listening.
Yes, they often think speaking is the most important skill, but good speaking usually starts with good listening.
That makes sense. Before children learn to speak their native language, they spend a long time listening.
Exactly. They listen to thousands of hours of language before they say their first words.
So English learners should also spend more time listening.
Yes, especially listening to natural conversations.
What kind of listening do you recommend?
I think the best materials are things that you can understand, but still challenge you a little.
So not too easy and not too difficult.
Exactly. If something is too easy, you don't improve much. If something is too difficult, you may become frustrated.
That balance is important.
Yes, a good learning method should make you feel challenged but motivated.
I think motivation is another big topic.
Definitely. Many people start learning English with excitement, but after a few months, they lose motivation
Why do you think that happens?
because they focus too much on the final goal and forget to enjoy the process.
That's interesting.
Some people think, I will be happy when I speak perfect English, but they don't enjoy the small improvements along the way.
Maybe they should celebrate small progress.
Exactly. Learning 10 new expressions, understanding a difficult conversation, or speaking for 5 minutes without stopping are all achievements.
I agree. Small progress creates confidence.
Yes, confidence is built step by step.
I think many people are afraid of making mistakes.
That is one of the biggest obstacles in language learning,
Why are mistakes such a big problem for learners?
because people often connect mistakes with failure. They think making mistakes means they are not good at English.
But mistakes are actually part of learning.
Exactly. Mistakes show that you are trying. If you never make mistakes, you may not be challenging yourself enough.
That's a powerful idea.
Yes, the goal is not to avoid mistakes. The goal is to learn from them.
I think one of the biggest mistakes English learners make is trying to study everything at the same time.
That's a common problem. Many people create a very complicated study plan. They want to memorize vocabulary, study grammar, practice speaking, watch movies, and read books every day. After a few days, they feel exhausted and stop.
So having a simple plan might actually be better.
Yes, a simple plan that you can follow every day is much more effective than a perfect plan that you cannot maintain.
I like that idea. Consistency seems to be more important than intensity.
That's something many learners don't realize. Spending 30 minutes every day can often bring better results than studying for 5 hours once a week.
Because the brain needs regular exposure.
Right, a language needs repeated contact. When you hear and use English regularly, your brain begins to recognize patterns naturally.
Many people ask, how long does it take to become fluent?
That question is difficult because everyone has a different background. Some people learn faster because they already know another language or they have more opportunities to practice.
So there is no exact number.
Not really. Instead of focusing only on time, learners should focus on progress. Ask yourself, can I understand more than I could last month?
That's a healthier way to measure improvement.
Yes, comparing yourself with other people can easily make you disappointed. Everyone has a different learning journey.
I think social media sometimes creates unrealistic expectations.
That happens a lot. People see someone speaking perfect English online and think they can become fluent in a few months, but they usually don't see the years of practice behind that person.
That's a good reminder.
Learning English is not a competition. The most important thing is building a habit that works for you.
I think another important question is how people should practice English every day. Many learners want to improve, but they don't know what they should actually do.
That's a good question because a lot of people spend time studying English without having a clear purpose. They do many things, but they don't always know if those activities are helping them.
So having a simple daily routine can make learning easier.
Yes, a routine gives your brain a clear signal that English is becoming part of your life, not just a subject you study occasionally.
What kind of daily routine would you recommend for someone who wants to improve their English?
I would divide it into several small parts. For example, listening for 15 minutes, learning useful expressions, and spending some time speaking or repeating sentences.
I like that approach because it doesn't sound overwhelming.
That's the key. Many people quit because their study plan is too difficult to follow. A good plan should fit your real life.
I think listening practice is probably the easiest thing to add to a daily routine.
It is. You can listen while doing other activities, such as walking, cooking, driving, or cleaning your room.
That makes learning more flexible.
Yes, English doesn't always have to happen at a desk with a textbook. The more you bring English into your daily life, the more natural it becomes.
Some people listen to English but feel like nothing changes.
That's because listening improvement is often invisible at the beginning. Your brain is collecting information even when you don't notice immediate results.
So progress may be happening quietly.
Exactly. Think about when you plant a seed. You don't see the roots growing every day, but something is happening underground.
That's a great example.
Language learning is similar. You may listen to hundreds of conversations, and one day you suddenly realize you understand much more than before.
I think that moment feels amazing for learners.
It does. Many people have a moment when they watch a video or hear a conversation and think, wait, I actually understood that.
That must give them a lot of motivation.
Yes, those small victories encourage people to continue.
Speaking of speaking practice, many learners are afraid to speak English.
That is probably one of the biggest challenges. They understand some English, but when they need to speak, their mind becomes empty.
Why does that happen?
Because speaking requires quick thinking. You need to find words, organize your ideas, and pronounce them at the same time.
That sounds much harder than just reading.
Yes, reading gives you time to think. Speaking happens in real time.
So how can people improve their speaking ability?
The most important thing is to practice regularly, even if your English is not perfect.
Many people wait until they feel ready.
That's the problem. They think they need perfect grammar before speaking, but speaking is how you improve your grammar and confidence.
That's an interesting point.
Imagine someone learning to swim. They cannot become a better swimmer by only reading about swimming. They need to get into the water.
Speaking English is similar.
Exactly. You have to use the language to develop the skill.
But what if someone doesn't have anyone to practice with?
There are many ways to practice. You can talk to yourself, record your voice, repeat after native speakers, or join online communities.
Talking to yourself sounds strange at first.
It does, but it's actually very useful. When you describe your day in English, you are training your brain to create sentences.
For example, saying what you are doing.
Yes, you can say things like, I'm making breakfast, I'm going to work, or I need to finish this task today.
Those sentences are simple, but they build a foundation.
Exactly. Many learners want to speak advanced English immediately, but strong communication starts with simple sentences.
I think that's something beginners need to hear.
Yes, simple English spoken confidently is much better than complicated English that you are afraid to use.
That's a great lesson.
Many people underestimate simple language. In real conversations, clear communication is usually more important than using difficult words.
So learners should focus on being understood.
Right, the goal of language is communication, not showing how many difficult words you know.
That changes the way people think about learning.
It should. English is a tool. It helps you connect with people, share ideas, and understand the world better.
I really like that perspective.
Learning English is not only about passing exams or memorizing rules. It can open doors to new experiences.
For example, traveling, making friends, or finding better opportunities.
Yes, a new language gives you access to different cultures and different ways of thinking.
I think vocabulary is another area where many English learners struggle. They spend a lot of time memorizing words, but they still feel like they cannot use them naturally.
That happens because many people learn vocabulary in isolation. They memorize a single word and its translation, but they don't learn how that word is actually used in real conversations.
Can you explain what you mean by learning words in context?
For example, someone may memorize the word decision and know that it means a choice. But in real conversations, people usually learn expressions like make a decision, a difficult decision, or I haven't made a decision yet.
So learning phrases is more useful than learning individual words.
Yes, when you learn a phrase, you are learning how native speakers naturally organize their thoughts.
That makes sense. A single word can have many meanings depending on the situation.
Exactly. Context helps your brain understand when and how to use a word.
I think this is why some people know thousands of words, but still struggle with speaking.
Right, they have a large vocabulary stored in their memory, but they don't have enough practice using those words.
It's like having tools, but not knowing how to use them.
That's a great comparison. Vocabulary becomes useful only when you can quickly recognize it and use it.
So how should learners study new words?
I would suggest choosing useful words from real situations. For example, words from conversations, videos, podcasts, or topics you are interested in.
That seems more practical than randomly memorizing a long word list.
Yes, when the words are connected to your life, they are easier to remember.
For example, if someone loves cooking, they can learn cooking-related expressions.
Exactly. Personal connection makes information stronger in your memory.
I think emotions also help people remember.
Definitely. When something is meaningful or interesting to you, your brain pays more attention.
That explains why people remember songs or movie lines so easily.
Yes, sometimes a sentence from a movie can stay in your mind for years because it is connected to a feeling or a story.
So using interesting materials is important.
Very important. Learning should not feel like a punishment. If you enjoy the process, you are more likely to continue.
Many learners ask whether watching movies and TV shows can improve English.
What do you think about that?
I think it can help, but only if people use it correctly.
I agree. Watching movies casually can be fun, but if your goal is learning, you need to pay attention.
So how can someone learn from movies or videos?
One method is to watch short sections repeatedly. First, watch with subtitles to understand the meaning. Then watch again and focus on pronunciation and expressions.
That sounds more effective than watching an entire movie without understanding much.
Yes, sometimes learners watch 2 hours of content, but remember almost nothing because they are only trying to follow the story.
Quality is more important than quantity.
Exactly. A 5-minute conversation that you study deeply can teach you more than an entire movie you barely understand.
That's a very useful tip.
I also recommend repeating interesting sentences. When you hear a natural expression, pause and say it yourself.
This is the shadowing method, right?
Yes, shadowing is a powerful technique because it connects listening and speaking.
How does it help?
When you repeat after a speaker, you practice pronunciation, rhythm, and speaking speed. Your mouth becomes more familiar with English.
I think many learners only train their eyes, not their ears and mouth.
That's true. They read a lot, but they don't listen enough or speak enough.
Reading is important, but language is a communication skill.
Exactly. A balanced approach is usually better.
What about grammar? Some people spend years studying grammar rules.
Grammar is important, but it should support communication, not stop communication.
What do you mean by that?
Some learners are afraid to speak because they are constantly checking whether every sentence is grammatically perfect.
That can make speaking stressful.
Yes, if you spend too much time worrying about mistakes, you may lose confidence.
So grammar should be learned through use.
That's a better approach. Learn basic rules, then practice using them in real sentences.
Instead of memorizing complicated explanations.
Right, the purpose of grammar is to help you express yourself clearly.
I think many learners become frustrated because they compare themselves to native speakers.
That comparison can be unfair. Native speakers have been surrounded by the language since childhood.
English learners are building a new skill as adults.
Exactly. It takes patience. Progress may feel slow, but every day of practice adds up.
That reminds me of the idea of small improvements.
Yes, learning one new expression today, understanding one more sentence tomorrow, and speaking a little more confidently next week are all meaningful progress.
I think one of the biggest goals for many English learners is to stop translating in their heads.
Yes, that is something many learners struggle with. They first think in their native language, translate the sentence, and then try to say it in English.
Why is that a problem?
Because real conversations happen quickly. If you always translate every sentence, your response time becomes slower and speaking can feel stressful.
That makes sense. Your brain has to do too many steps.
Exactly. You have to think of an idea, translate it, check the grammar, and then speak. It takes a lot of energy.
So how can people start thinking in English?
It takes practice, but a good way is to start with simple thoughts. For example, when you see something around you, try describing it in English.
Like looking at a cup and thinking, "This is my coffee cup."
Yes, those small thoughts train your brain to connect directly with English instead of always going through translation.
That sounds simple, but I think it could be very effective.
It is. Many people think they need to have deep conversations in English immediately, but thinking in English starts with everyday things.
For example, describing your morning routine.
Exactly. You can think, I'm getting ready for work. I need to buy some groceries, or I'm feeling tired today.
Those are common sentences people use every day.
Right. The more familiar you become with these basic expressions, the easier it becomes to create longer sentences.
I think another challenge is staying motivated for a long time.
Yes, starting is usually easy. The difficult part is continuing when progress feels slow.
That happens with many goals, not only language learning.
Exactly. At the beginning, everything feels exciting. You learn new words and feel like you are improving quickly, but later, progress becomes less obvious.
That's when many people give up.
Yes, they think, maybe I'm not good at languages, when the real problem is that they have reached a normal stage of learning.
A stage where improvement becomes slower.
Right? Every learner experiences that. The important thing is to continue.
How can people stay motivated during that period?
I think having a personal reason is very important.
What kind of reason?
For example, someone may want to communicate with people from different countries, travel more comfortably, understand movies, or improve their career opportunities.
So the reason behind learning matters.
Very much. When your reason is meaningful, you are more willing to continue during difficult moments.
I think people also need to enjoy the learning process.
Yes, if studying English always feels like a boring responsibility, it becomes difficult to maintain.
So learners should find activities they actually enjoy.
Exactly. If you like music, learn through songs. If you like sports, watch interviews with athletes. If you like stories, listen to English podcasts.
That makes English part of your lifestyle,
Yes, the best learners are often people who bring English into their daily lives naturally.
not just studying for an hour and forgetting about it.
Right, language needs regular contact.
I think creating an English environment is difficult for people who live in places where English is not commonly spoken.
It can be challenging, but technology has made it much easier than before.
Because there are so many online resources now.
Exactly. People can listen to podcasts, watch videos, join online communities, and communicate with people around the world.
So learners can create their own English environment.
Yes, you don't need to live in an English-speaking country to improve.
That's encouraging.
Of course, living in an English-speaking environment can help, but your daily habits are still the most important factor.
I think that's something many people misunderstand.
They believe they need the perfect environment before they can improve, but they can start with what they already have.
Small daily actions can create big changes.
Yes, 15 minutes of listening today, 10 minutes of speaking tomorrow, and regular practice over months can completely change your ability.
I like that because it feels realistic.
Learning English should be realistic. A plan that you can follow for a year is better than a plan that only lasts 1 week.
That is probably the biggest lesson.
Consistency beats short periods of intense effort.
I think we should also talk about one important skill, listening.
Yes, listening is often the hardest skill because spoken English is different from textbook English.
That's true. In real conversations, people speak faster and connect sounds together.
Exactly. Native speakers often don't pronounce every word separately. Words blend together naturally.
That can be difficult for learners.
It can. For example, a learner may know every word in a sentence, but when they hear it spoken naturally, they don't recognize it.
So the problem is not vocabulary. It's recognizing the sound.
Right. Your brain needs time to become familiar with natural pronunciation.
That's why repeated listening is important.
Yes, listening to the same material several times can train your ears.
Some learners think repeating is boring.
Many people do, but repetition is actually how our brains learn patterns.
Like listening to a favorite song many times.
Exactly. Nobody thinks listening to a song repeatedly is strange, but it is the same idea with English.
That's a great comparison.
Enjoyment makes repetition easier.
I think many English learners want to know one practical thing. If they only have 30 minutes a day, what should they do?
That's a great question because many people believe they need several hours every day to make progress. But the truth is that a consistent 30-minute routine can already create meaningful improvement.
So let's imagine someone is starting a 30-day English listening challenge. How would you organize those 30 minutes?
I would divide the time into different activities. The first 10 minutes could focus on listening. Choose a conversation, podcast, or video that matches your level and listen carefully.
Would you recommend listening with subtitles?
At the beginning, subtitles can be helpful. They allow you to understand the meaning. But after that, try listening again without subtitles to train your ears.
So subtitles should be a tool, not something learners depend on forever.
Exactly. Subtitles are useful, but the final goal is to understand spoken English naturally.
What about the next 10 minutes?
I would spend that time repeating and practicing. Choose several sentences from the audio and say them out loud.
Why is saying sentences aloud so important?
Because your brain needs to connect understanding with speaking. When you repeat sentences, you are training your listening and speaking skills at the same time.
That's interesting. So listening alone is not enough.
Right, passive listening is helpful, but active practice creates stronger improvement.
What should people do in the final 10 minutes?
They can review useful expressions, write a few sentences, or talk about their day in English.
That sounds very manageable.
Yes, the goal is not to make learning complicated. The goal is to build a habit that continues every day.
I think 30 days is a good challenge. because it is long enough to create a habit, but short enough to feel possible.
That's true. Many people are afraid of big goals like, I want to become fluent. A 30-day challenge feels more achievable.
Small goals can create confidence.
Exactly. When people complete small goals, they start believing they can achieve bigger ones.
I think another important part of learning English is patience.
Yes, language learning requires patience because improvement is not always visible immediately.
Sometimes people practice for weeks and feel like nothing is happening.
That feeling is normal. Your brain is still processing information and building connections.
So people shouldn't quit during those quiet periods.
Right, many successful learners are not necessarily the fastest learners. They are the ones who continue.
That's a powerful message.
Consistency is often more important than talent.
I really believe that. Someone who practices a little every day can eventually pass someone who studies occasionally.
Absolutely. Regular exposure creates progress over time.
What advice would you give to someone who has been learning English for years but still lacks confidence?
I would tell them to recognize how far they have already come. Many learners focus only on what they cannot do and forget what they have achieved.
That's very true.
Maybe they couldn't understand simple conversations before. Maybe they were afraid to introduce themselves. Every improvement matters.
Sometimes people are too hard on themselves.
Yes, learning a language is a long journey, and everyone moves at a different speed.
I think comparing yourself with others can hurt motivation.
It can, instead of asking, why am I not as good as that person? Ask, am I better than I was last month?
That's a much healthier question.
Exactly. Your biggest competition is your past self.
I like that idea.
Learning English is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming a better version of yourself and having more ways to express who you are.
That's a beautiful way to describe language learning.
Thank you. A language is not just a collection of words and grammar rules. It carries ideas, emotions, and connections between people.
That's why learning English can change someone's life.
Yes, it can introduce you to new information, new friendships, new cultures, and new opportunities.
I think many people start learning English because they want a practical benefit, but later they discover something deeper.
That happens often. At first, people may want English for work or travel, but eventually they realize it helps them understand the world in a different way.
That's a wonderful journey.
Yes, every new word you learn is like opening a small door. The more doors you open, the bigger your world becomes.
I love that expression.
Learning a language takes time, but every step is valuable.
So for everyone listening today, don't worry about being perfect.
Keep practicing, keep listening, and keep improving little by little.
Even if you only learn one sentence today, that sentence is progress.
Even if you make mistakes today, those mistakes are helping you become better tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to today's conversation.
We hope this episode helped you practice English listening and gave you some useful ideas for your learning journey.
Remember, English improvement does not happen overnight.
It happens through small actions repeated every day.
Keep listening, keep practicing, and believe in your progress.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Take care and have a wonderful day.
Goodbye, everyone. Keep learning English.